Hello, lesson 12 is the last one, and it will be devoted to the 20th century essay. Here we are going to study two essays by two famous modernist essayists, Chesterton and Gardiner. After completing this lesson, you should be able to identify Chesterton and Gardiner as modernist essayists and analyze their essays on running after one's hat and on shaking hands. So after getting a comprehensive idea of the 20th century poetry, novel, and drama, the present lesson is to cast light on essay as a type of prose or non-fiction prose. We'll begin with A.G. Gardiner essay on shaking hands. Have to get an idea about the writer Alfred George Gardiner. He was born in 1865 and he died in 1946. He is a British journalist and author. His essays, written under the pen name Alpha of the Plough. He was also the chairman of the National Anti-Swearing League, an advocacy group which campaigned for a minimum wage in industry. Some of his essays are Prophets, Priests and Kings, Pillars of Society, and the War Lords, in addition to so many. Here we are to warm up, and to warm up we have to answer these questions. What do you do to greet people when you meet them after a long time? So what is your favorite type of greeting people, or tradition or custom of greeting people? Number 2 is, what do you know about shaking hands? Shaking the hands. Before explaining and analyzing the essay, you have to read the essay. So your activity or pre-activity before studying the essay, you have to read it and to understand it, of course. On shaking hands. Now you are supposed to read, to have been read the essay. Now we will review the essay, summary of it, and its style and diction. On shaking hands, A.G. Gardiner speaks about the common Western practice of greeting others by shaking hands. It appears to be the most natural way of greeting people. The custom, however, is not without its disadvantages. It is criticized in the Western press on the grounds of hygiene matters. People are urged to adopt a more suitable and healthier way of greeting one another. Gardiner looks at the other modes of salutation, the bows of Japanese, the salams of the Indians, the grave motion of the hand of the Chinese. The Arab touches the chest with the tips of fingers. I don't know where did he get this about Arabs. The custom of one nation seems indecent to the other. For example, the Western habit of kissing is not accepted by Japanese. The author speaks about the many disadvantages that the custom of shaking hands has. It appears coarse and bucolic, according to him, to the other cultures. There is no pleasure when one has to shake warm, clammy, listless, flaccid, bony, or energetic hands. So when you shake such types of hands, you don't feel comfortable. The author suggests that a person's handshake is a mark of his or her personality. Gardiner illustrates with humorous real-life examples. Number one is Beaker, the publisher. According to the author, he shakes hands in a cold way as though he wanted to get rid of his hand. Number two is Stoppings. By contrast, he shakes your hand almost out of its socket. Some hands lie in your palm until you feel like throwing them out of the window. The author concludes that despite its disturbances, shaking hands is still worth the occasional penalty that we have to pay for it. Now the structure of this argumentative essay. The structure can be recognized as having four parts. Number one is introduction. Number two, disadvantages. Number three, examples of other types of greeting. Number four, real life discomfort. And number five is the conclusion. The introduction. In introduction, he talks about the Western practice of shaking hands. The Western people have got used to the custom of shaking hands so much that it happens more as a reflex action when two friends meet or part. So this is the way the writer introduces his topic. Thereafter, he moved to argue about disadvantages and examples of other types of greeting. In the disadvantages, he said it is not good for health, and people are urged to adopt a more suitable and healthier way of greeting one another. And he gives some examples of the other types of greeting. He looks at the other modes of salutation of Japanese, Indians, Chinese, and Arabs. He thereafter illustrated with real-life examples of discomfort of handshaking. He gave us as examples Beakers called handshaking and Stubbings violent one. After that, he concluded with that it is a happy mean between the Oriental salam and the Russian enormous hug, but that he means what? Handshaking. And if it is arguably less dignified, it definitely has more warmth and more of the spirit of human friendliness. That is all about the first essay. Now we will move on to J.K. Chesterton and his essay on running after one's hat. We have to introduce the writer, Gilbert Keith Chesterton. He was born in 1874 and he died in 1936. He is an English writer, poet, philosopher, dramatist, journalist, orator, biographer, and a literary and art critic. He is often referred to as the Prince of Paradox, so he is well known for his paradox. He wrote numerous essays on trivial, commonplace, and humorous themes. Chesterton is well known for his fictional priest detective novel, of course, Father Brown and Orthodoxy, and The Everlasting Man. I've got to warm up by answering these questions. What was the biggest problem you got? And how did you feel? And what did you do to handle that problem? Gardiner essay is on running after one's hat. From its title, it looks interesting. How to run after one's hat. Of course, your activity is to read deeply and carefully the essay on running after one's hat. After reading the essay, then you can understand its themes and style. Chesterton's essay on running after one's hat is about optimism and how it can change the way things are handled in life. It shows that with a little change in thinking, inconveniences can be seen as adventures instead. To support his argument, he supported his argument by the example of the flood that wreaks havoc on London. And instead of complaining, people have to enjoy the scene as if it to be in Venice. So here you have two pictures, one of a city flooded and troubled by flood. So it represents the negative aspect of what? The negative aspect of the phenomenon. And the other is that of Venice. It has the same circumstances, but we can look at it, or it represents the positive aspect of the phenomenon of water mingling with streets and buildings. An inconvenience, according to Chesterton, an inconvenience is an inconvenience only if the mind considers it to be so. He gives an example of a particular friend of his who grumbled every day because his door would not open easily and would make noise. So it is a big problem for his friend. He explains that this is an inconvenience only because our mind considers that the drawer should, could, and would open easily. If we rather take it as an adventure, there is no place for grumbling. So he wants us to take life easily and to consider the problems and troubles we got in life as something to enjoy, as adventures that we have to enjoy. That is a theme. How about the style of Chesterton essays? The author's style is graphic and humorous. He uses a series of anecdotes and analogies for developing an ideas, like the one of comparing London flooded or wrecked, in which London was troubled by the flood. He compared it with the city, the beautiful and nice city of Venice. So he wanted us to consider the streets flooded in London to compare them with the beautiful streets of Venice. We can see most of the typical Chesterton characteristics on display in this famous essay. And rereading the essay, that's what we have to do, we can find many paradoxes and epigrams. Now, your activity is to reread the essay and to find examples of paradoxes and epigrams in it. This lesson introduced Chesterton's and Gardiner as modernist essayists. It also analyzed their essays on running after one's hat and on shaking hands. Your assignment you'll find in the file, assignment 12. Thank you and all the best.